Child Labor and Ecological Destruction on Obtaining Materials for Renewable Energy with Ronald Stein, author, engineer, and energy policy advisor. Good afternoon, Ronald. It's a pleasure to have you again today.
Armando, glad to be back.
Thank you. This is Ronald. And Ronald, you published recently uh, an article, exactly the title that you are using this live today. Please tell us where this article was published and
It was published originally at the Heartland Institute and then republished in many other locations. The the subject is, carnage of child labor and ecological destruction elsewhere. Elsewhere is okay. As long as we can't see it, it's okay. And ironically, that was the basis of the book that Todd Royal and I wrote a couple years ago, Clean Energy Exploitations. And the the book was nominated for Pulitzer Prize. It brings transparency to the fact that all the exotic minerals and metals to build EV batteries, wind turbines, solar panels are coming from developing countries that have no labor laws, no environmental laws, and we're exploiting people that have yellow, brown, and black skin, and we're allowing environmental degradation to their land, and it's atrocious. And we're just trying to bring transparency to this fact. And as a result of writing the book and knowing where all these materials are coming from, Armando, I think I mentioned you before. I've made a personal decision. I will not buy an EV for, for ethical and moral reasons
because
because
the
I know where
price
the
is very high.
no, forget the price. I know where the lithium and cobalt is coming from, and I'm not willing to financially support that. On the other hand, the government is. They're encouraging incentives, tax breaks. They're providing financial incentives for these developing countries to continue exploiting their people, continue the environmental degradation over there. And I find it ethical and unethical and immoral. But hey, you can't argue with the government.
Yeah, that's real. So renewable energies and electrification, general electrification, as we are doing nowadays, requiring tons, billion of tons of cobalt, lithium. I don't know everything, but and where are they being manufactured, mined, and which countries, which controls, environmental controls? What exactly is going on?
Well, China controls a good majority of it. A lot of it's being mined in China, Africa, some parts of Brazil. But yeah, it's all these developing countries that, ironic, you mentioned the cost of EVs. Well, the cost of EVs is pretty expensive. And if they mine for it with labor laws, with environmental laws, then it would be ethical. But if you do it that way, the cost of the lithium and the cobalt is going to go sky high, which is going to drive up the price of the EV, which they can't afford to do that because they're almost unaffordable now. And so, yeah, it's a strange situation that no one's paying attention to that. Many years ago, we were concerned about the sweatshops in the clothing industry, and the world was all over that. But with this carnage of child labor, you got kids mining this stuff, by hand. In fact, the cover of the book, we Todd Roy and I spent a lot of time thinking about that. The cover of the book is a picture taken in Africa with a military guy with an Uzi overseeing a family mining for the stuff by hand, and that should be public knowledge to the people before they go buy an EV. Because when you buy an EV, you're basically supporting that to continue. And like you say, I think the government providing these incentives and tax breaks is totally unethical and immoral because they're just promoting more and more of it.
I have a complicated question for you.
Okay.
Why billionaires and authorities like Bill Gates, let's see more, John Kerry with Jeff, Mark Zuckerberg, George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, uh, Joe Biden, Antonio Guterres, oh, famous guy, Ursula von der Leyen, and Fatih Birol. Why they are not saying anything about this mining child labor impact on the environment? Why are they so quiet, Ronald? You are mute. Without your sound. Not yet. Please try again. No. I have a technical problem. Sorry about that, but Ron is trying to recover his system. No, not yet. You wanted to leave and be back with the same link? Maybe sometimes it works. No, no, no. Yeah. So please, sorry about that, but Ron is probably coming very soon. Yes,
We okay?
yes, yes, yes.
Okay, okay, we connected again.
No problem. So why are they so quiet?
Well, the all the individuals you named, I think there's a general confusion amongst society. They keep talking about the word energy, and wind and solar is going to replace fossil fuels. But Armando, wind and solar only generate electricity. They manufacture absolutely nothing for society. And so I think that's why everybody's against fossil fuels and is pro renewables, and EVs are basically electric. But the confusion, I tend to be very selective when I use the word energy because wind and solar generate electricity, manufacture nothing, where coal can be used to generate electricity, natural gas can be used to generate electricity. Crude oil is never used to generate electricity. In fact, crude oil by itself is useless unless you can manufacture it into something usable. And it's black tar, and it goes through a complicated refining process where they heat it and cool it and crack it and beat it to death, and they come up with a bunch of oil derivatives that accounts for 6,000 products in our daily lives that didn't exist a couple hundred years ago. We now have 50,000 merchant ships throughout the world and 50,000 jets. We got militaries in every country. We have space program. They cannot exist without oil. And to say that wind and solar is going to replace that, it can't happen. In fact, if you get rid of fossil fuels, in particular, if you get rid of crude oil, you eliminate wind turbines, solar panels, and EVs because they're all made with fossil fuels.
Absolutely.
I mean, take our illustrious president. He's flying it around in a 400-ton airplane,
Oh my God.
100% made with fossil fuels, all the electronics, all the interior, et cetera, et cetera. And it's powered by aviation fuel that is manufactured from crude oil. And he's screaming in the microphone, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels. Armando, is there a disconnect here? And so, like I say, there's a confusion that renewables, so-called wind and solar, are going to replace oil. They can't because they do different things.
Yeah, they can. And the reason they are quiet is because they are afraid to receive. What's the organization that's driving this situation?
No, I don't think they're afraid. To be honest, I think they're just ignorant.
Oh,
because, you know, and I'm surprised that when these debates happen, that no one asks the question, what happens if you get rid of fossil fuels, particularly crude oil? Now, you can get rid of coal, you maybe have nuclear, different ways to generate electricity. Uh, you got nuclear and natural gas, but you have limitations of how to generate electricity. But right now, we have no backup plan. I'm all
No,
for getting rid of crude oil.
no
Just show me
contingency.
a backup plan. But
No.
before I jump out of the airplane without a parachute, I'd like to know I have something that can work. And
Yes,
by the way, the parachute is made with fossil fuels.
yeah, the versions, yes. But why the U.S. are not mining in its territory? What's the reason for that?
Oh, it's obvious because lithium mining is strip mining. It is dirty, dirty mining. And, coal mining is clean compared to lithium mining because coal mining, a lot of it's underground. You don't see it. But lithium mining is atrocious. The environment has to be all over it. They would never allow a lithium mine in the United States. The environmental degradation, they're not going to let that happen. And as a result, you could mine for it here, but with all the labor laws and the cost of labor and the environmental degradation guidelines you're going to have to adhere to, it would drive up the cost of lithium, which would drive up the cost of EVs, which they can't afford to drive up the cost of EVs because they're unaffordable to most people now.
But are there reserves of this material, these metals in the United States, I suppose?
There's some, not as much. Like I say, Afghanistan has a bunch of lithium, and that's all under control of the Chinese. But
But
other countries have it.
yeah, tell me something. There are incentives, subsidies, of course, with the money, the citizen money. It's not their money. The decision is your money and my money, of course. But they are mining in other countries. Is something similar to the outsourcing, manufacturing outsourcing in the time of China a few decades ago? I mean, did you understand me?
Well, like you say, we import a lot of stuff here into the United
Sure.
States because it's tough to manufacture anything here because of the environmental laws. Because I live here in California, which is probably the most environmentally controlled location in the world. So if you have anything that's going to be manufactured, it might be emitting emissions. You probably want to do it in California to minimize the world emissions. But like you say, people say, well, do it elsewhere. I joke that our California governor only breathes California air. Anything outside the perimeters of California, he doesn't breathe that. So he can basically keep improving California air, but he's increasing emissions to the world by having someone else do it
Yeah, sure.
that doesn't have the same controls that we do.
Yeah.
So it's it's a Ponzi scheme, is what it is.
How do you see the vulnerabilities for Western countries with this movement of uh, minerals and mining outside our countries?
Well, like I say, everybody is bought into the renewable energy as we replace fossil fuels, and until they recognize that they're two different things, like you say, as I mentioned, I'm all for getting rid of fossil fuels. I mean, getting rid of crude oil if it's a backup plan. Because remember, everything that needs electricity, everything that needs electricity is made with crude oil. The iPhone can be charged with electricity, but electricity can't make the iPhone. The defibrillator in the hospital, electricity can make it work, but electricity can't make the defibrillator. And it goes on and on. Everything in your house, your business, the hospital, try and identify something, anything that was not made with oil.
And what do you mean as a backup? You mentioned twice this term. Backup is a contingency. Is
Well,
this?
back up, like I say, right now the crude oil, when they go through refineries, a lot of oil derivatives that makes the toothpaste and the you
Oh,
know everything else. Um,
dispatchable.
you're right, and basically it's all carbon based. It's all
Okay.
coming out of the carbon
Yeah.
chemistry of crude oil. So we've had 200 years to come up with a replacement and been unable to do it. And I keep telling people everybody wants to go to a zero emission society. Well, we had a zero emission society back in the 1800s. There were no coal fired power plants. There were no natural gas power plants. There was no nuclear power plants. The Beverly Hillbillies hadn't discovered oil yet. But life was short. People very seldom lived beyond 40. And when they were born, they very seldom traveled 100 miles from where they were born. Life was hard. And, I personally don't want to go back to that. People want to get rid of oil, but they don't want to give up their iPad. Well, wait a minute. You got to make a choice. If you really want to get rid of oil, then everything in your house, sleeping bag, get rid of oil would solve the homeless problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because all the homeless people live in sleeping bags and tents, which are made from oil. So it's crazy. I mean, you got to identify something that was not made with oil. And if you get rid of oil, what's your backup plan? How are you going to manufacture all this stuff?
Yeah.
All the automobile manufacturers go out of business because they got no parts.
No parts. That's right. You mentioned in the very beginning of our conversation about ethical and moral. So I would like to be back to this term, ethical and moral responsibilities of these people that are buying in these conditions, meaning EVs made with this child labor and environmental impact. That we're not taking care of that. So I buy a car and everything is okay for me. I'm not seeing these problems.
Well, exactly. Like I say, because the battery, the Tesla being a sedan has I want to call it a small battery. It's only 1,000 pounds. Because you get into a bigger vehicle, you get into really big batteries. But there's, I think, 25 pounds of lithium in there, and all the different exotic minerals and metals. But it's just like the sweatshops that people were against, in the garment industry, and they didn't want to buy garments that were made with, child labor type thing, but were willing to buy an EV that was made from the same people. And the reason is we're providing incentives. The government wants us to do that.
Mm.
So I like to say, when you buy an EV, like I say, you're providing financial support for the, carnage of child labor and the environmental degradation over there.
Yeah.
Here in the United States and probably in Brazil, whenever you build something, be it a nuclear power plant or a coal-fired power plant or a refinery, you have to show at the beginning how you're going to reclaim that land back to its pristine condition
Yeah.
when that facility shuts down. That doesn't apply in the exotic minerals and metals. Like I say, whenever they reach the end of the lithium in that location, it's moved to a different site. They just leave it there. But they have so
Yeah.
much land, and like I say, we can't see it, so it's okay.
Mm. Ronald, comparing wind and solar power, um, what do you see best, the better one, and I mean considering environmental impact and efficiency,
Which one is better? You're talking about picking two
wind and
losers?
solar.
The two losers? I wouldn't pick either one because A, they don't work 80 to 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And they get financing based on their nameplate rating. If you want to put in a 100 megawatt wind turbine facility, they get funding for 100 megawatts, but they never generate that. Maybe a couple hours a day when the wind's really blowing. And I think they should be degraded for not meeting that rating. You take a coal-fired power plant, a natural gas power plant, a nuclear power plant, they deliver like 95% of their nameplate because they're running all the time. They come down occasionally for maintenance or repairs, but they're running all the time. Wind and solar, no. And
No.
then you take different weather conditions. You know, Again, I'm on the West Coast in California. We have the most temperate climate in the entire United States. It's
Fantastic.
never too hot, never too cold. But you take, the Midwest, they get some pretty sad winters there, and the South, it gets pretty hot, and it's terrible. And if you have an EV in climate, now you're really in trouble because of all the EVs in the entire country, 40% of them are here in California.
Mhm.
Easy calculation, Armando. The other 60% are divided among the other 48 states here in Hawaii, which is like 1% per state.
Yeah.
Because if you're driving in cold climate, the battery doesn't hold as much juice. And if it's cold, you want your heater to run. Well, Armando, the heater runs off the battery,
Yeah.
which drives
Yeah.
down your mileage. And if it's hot out, if you're down in Louisiana and it's scorching outside, you want your air conditioner running. Well, Armando, the air conditioner runs off the battery.
Yeah.
And so, which further, degrades your distance. And it's, like I say, I think it's a losing proposition.
Uh,
And then you get down to affordability. That it's it's amazing that the most people, well, the profile of an EV owner is someone who's has highly educated, 1 or 2 degrees, high income, 100,000 minimum, multi-car family, and most people aren't in that range. And it's amazing that there's so many people living paycheck to paycheck that I think in the United States, CNN reported that more than 60% are living paycheck to paycheck.
uh,
And it's something, it's financially, they're very vulnerable.
mhm.
And you know you have to ask yourself, or ask anybody who has an EV. In fact, ask government officials and environmentalists. You really have to ask them 2 questions.
Mhm.
Do you own an EV? Second question, is
Mhm.
it your primary vehicle?
Okay. Yeah.
Because most EV owners, it's a
Have
second
have
car.
more than one car. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And they can afford it. They've got a garage they can park it in and charge it in.
Yeah.
But most people live in paycheck to paycheck. And with all the shortages and inflation, it's just humongous that everybody is stretched so far that they can't afford a house, and so they're parking in the street. And if you park in the street, how are you going to charge your car?
Mhm. Mhm.
I
I
know
have a,
in the UK, they basically passed a law back in June of last year that says that all chargers are programmed not to work 9 hours a day. During peak load requirements, they don't want to, destabilize the grid. So 9 hours a day, they don't work. But the most important thing about the UK rule is they have all the chargers on separate meters.
yeah, interesting.
They know
So
they
they,
know
they
they're
can
they're gonna have,
control. They
right.
can
They're gonna have
control
to
these chargers.
right. They're gonna have to rebuild the grid, and they know it's going to cost a lot of money. So who's going to pay for it? The EV owners.
Probably they are constructing a separate grid to the EV cars, and I don't know, but something like that to separate and mitigate the impact of EVs. But it's impossible. The total energy is the same.
Yes, yes. And so, like you say, you're going to have it's going to be a tough transition, and I think the auto industry has been mandated into a death spiral. They've been
Yeah.
mandated to make these widgets that most people can't afford. The elites have bought them, and the elites will continue to buy them. But when the sales go from 10 to 20, you're promoting, hey, sales went up 100%. Well, Armando, we're talking about millions of cars are sold, and today there is no used car market for EVs, primarily because they're new cars.
Interesting. Yes, interesting.
And nobody wants to buy a used EV anyhow because the battery.
But
If you have to
I,
replace the battery,
oh,
it could
bad.
be a $10,000 item.
Yeah, yeah.
And so yeah, so it's going to
It's a
be
very high, very rapid depreciation, probably. So the old
huge. Yeah,
cars, yeah, good.
right.
Interesting. Oh, we have a question here. Uh,
Okay.
Luis, 15 to 25% of the of oil, that percent is burner and manufacture. All products should be continued, but not more continued primary burner. It is very precious resource. that we need to preserve for next generation with raw materials to develop new products. It's something related to your thoughts before. So he needs he's intended to say that the part of oil that's let's see used to manufacture products must be preserved, something like that.
Well, a barrel of crude oil is 42 gallons of oil, and generally about half of it is used to manufacture different fuels: gasoline, diesel, aviation fuel, bunker fuel used in ships, a cheap brand of fuel. The other half of the barrel is basically used to make these oil derivatives that makes everything in our daily lives. And like say, if we get rid of oil, you're going to get rid of the 50,000 merchant ships, the 50,000 jets, all the militaries go away. You know, Armando, I'm in shock that in the United States, we have a lot of military generals of different, fields, and they report to their boss, President Joe Biden, and none of them has asked a question: how are we gonna run our military without oil?
So the president next week, next year, you have an election in the United States, and
Yes,
probably
yes.
president could be changed. So we expect that can be someone that can receive this message better.
Well, Biden won't. I mean, he's basically convinced everybody, and no one's willing to ask him an embarrassing question. Like I say, when he's screaming, "We're going to get rid of fossil fuels," when he's flying in his airplane,
Uh,
how are you going to keep it in in the air? Um, no, if Biden gets elected, we'll continue down this road of
I got
wind and solar and EVs, and yeah, like you say, I think it's unethical and immoral.
but not from his thoughts. It's something that he are receiving from others and believing in people that are trying to convince him.
I don't think anybody's addressing that question to him. I mean, even the press when you ask an embarrassing question,
Oh.
and so you know, um, I mean, a simple question. You know, if you get rid of oil, how do you keep your plane airborne? I mean, that's a simple question, isn't it?
Very simple question. Only one answer, very simple one. Let's give a message of hope, if we can do it in terms of energy nowadays. Any disruption that you can predict or feel or perceive, in your opinion, your feeling?
Well, I think we really have to promote conservation, continued efficiencies, because, yeah, oil has given us a life we didn't have 200 years ago, but oil by itself is not going to last billions of years. And so it's great what it does, but we want to, conserve it and make it last, not only through our lifespan, but, our grandchildren's lifespan and beyond that. So we don't want to waste anything. And so it's energy conservation, efficiencies, but this idea of electricity is going to replace oil. It can't. They do different things.
Yeah.
And that's the recognition. I wish people would be a little bit more energy literate so they can talk about it at the dinner table.
Hmm.
Because, like I say, you take wind and solar. I mean, the wind turbines and the solar panels, we have yet to determine a good way to recycle it.
Hmm.
The EV batteries, no one's asking a question. I mean, there's no economical way that's been determined yet how to economically, efficiently, recycle this stuff. If we could recycle it and, keep using it, great. But, you know, Australia has tons and tons of toxic waste dumps of wind turbine blades.
Yeah.
They just can't break them down. And these wind turbine blades are huge. Some of the blades are almost as
Oh,
big as a
big.
football field.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Impressive.
but they look small because the picture's taken from 10 miles
Yeah,
away.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, with a plane of 10 kilometers far from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me go to the last point, please, Ronald.
Okay.
Nuclear.
Yes.
Comparing to the beginning of our conversation in terms of child labor and uh, environmental degeneration, nuclear is something similar to that? And do you bet in nuclear energy?
100%. Yes. In fact, I think a good part of the world, there's a lot of nuclear being built, designed in all countries except the United States, because we got Jane Fonda as our expert here. And so she talks everybody out of it. But no, especially with the small modular reactors, the SMRs, even Bill Gates is investing in that
Exactly.
because that's a good chance of producing I would call it a cookie cutter. You can put a small modular reactor in a location and service 100,000 people with electricity that's carbon free and like I say, it's continuous, it's uninterruptible, and you need continuous and uninterruptible electricity. You can't run a hospital on intermittent electricity.
Sure, sure.
If you're on the operating table and the wind stops blowing, you, you may not be in the best position to be in. So no, I think the United States and a lot of countries have invested a lot of money in technology of how we're going to get to the moon. Well, I think they should be focusing a lot of investment in these SMRs, the small modular reactors.
Oh,
Get that, fine tuned because if we can, get that to be, I want to call it a cookie cutter. Yeah, you can get to all these developing countries and get them electricity. They need continuous, uninterruptible,
yeah.
affordable electricity, and I think that's the way to do it.
But what's the reason to defend the small size? Because the risk of something goes wrong and the impact could be small. Is this the reason?
No, no, technologically, it's the old technology required these massive, nuclear
Uh-huh.
reactors.
Big ones.
But I think everything else, cars used to be, big, now they're a lot smaller. I think it's an effort to get into a smaller reactor that can be duplicatable, and I think that's the way to. I think there's a great future in these small modular reactors. In
Uh,
fact, the Department of Energy did a study. They released it last year about converting coal-fired power plants
mhm.
into nuclear power plants.
I understand. Yeah.
And again, the footprint of a coal-fired power plant, you could basically take it out and put a small modular reactor in.
Hmm.
And so
Okay.
you can get rid of fossil fuels and have, emission-free electricity.
Perfect. Larry James. My career spans carbon and renewable energies, and I agree with the sentiment here. More time should be spent to the data about atrocities and of renewable mining. Sorry, it's difficult for me to read here. And waste, including the recycling challenges of batteries. Until the hearts of people are made to care, they want to hear your good arguments. Okay.
When I when I give speeches, it's really on that subject, that clean energy exploitations.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
And
Stay with the book here a little bit. Yes, good, good.
okay,
Okay. The name is Clean Energy.
energy ex, clean energy exploitations.
Okay, great.
It's on Amazon. Just type it in, and it just pops right up. But
Wellness.
yeah, it basically, it's myself and Todd Royal. We wrote it,
Okay.
and it was nominated for Pulitzer Prize because of the message that it provides. And I think, before you buy something, you want to figure what's behind it. Who made this
Yes.
car or whatever. And like I say, I won't buy one because I probably know more than most people after writing the book and all the details. So yeah, it's a type of thing that I think people, if they're more cognizant of it, and the same thing with the government. I mean, how can a government provide you incentives that perpetuates this occurring continuously? You want to stop this, not continue it. And and I think that's why the auto industry has been mandated into a death spiral.
Yeah, sure. Larry is saying that we'll add to his list. That's great. Ronald Stein. More one
Oh,
time.
Armando, one other
Yeah,
thing. The
sure,
the
sure.
book is in layman's terms, no technical graphs and formulas. And because, my passion is to allow people to talk about energy at the dinner table.
Simply.
And, what's the pros? What's the cons? There's nothing 100% good. There's some bad,
Sure.
but you
Sure.
got to take the good with the bad, and you have
Yeah.
to evaluate it that. And like I say, we have so much we have today. 200 years ago, we didn't have this. All the electronics, the communications, the be able to Zoom, have a meeting,
Yeah.
work from home. That's all technologically driven, and
Uh,
all those components, the earplugs are made with fossil
uh,
fuels.
yeah.
And like I say, it's a lifestyle that we enjoy, and I think we can continue it. But we want to be conservative and not be wasteful. But yeah, be cognizant of the implications because, like I say, if you buy an EV, where'd all that material come from? The supply chain is kind of hidden. We're not going to talk about that. Yeah,
Responsibility is the name. Is the name.
exactly.
Responsibility. Yeah.
Right.
Ronald Stein, was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Armando, have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.